different in nature. I mean, we have to sort out the issue of growth. We have to sort out the issue of faltering sustainable development goals. We have to sort out issues that relate to global debt and indebtedness that countries face. We have to take forward the issue of climate change, climate actions, lifestyle for environment, and how do we address issues that are in that domain. We have to also, I think, look at how we can reform the multilateral institutions, especially the multilateral financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, so that they can deliver for the needs of the 21st century. At the same time, the World Organization is important to reform so that it can foster greater trade and smoother movement of goods and services across the world. And finally, women-led development. I think that is a very strong priority in our presidency, and we want to ensure that that theme is cross-cutting across our presidency and it impacts in many ways in the outcomes that we see. And finally, let me say that in terms of, and of course, I'm happy to speak about our G20 priorities. I've been able to touch on it very briefly because time is of the essence, and there is only so much you can say when you talk about Indian foreign policy and our G20 presidency in 20 minutes. But we also have that vision of ensuring that G20 meetings are not just, that the G20 is not something remote that's just happening in the capital, that's in Delhi, but that the G20 is taken to every state and union territory of India. So very uniquely, we are hosting our 200-odd G20 meetings in every part of the country. Dr. Vidya mentioned that earlier. We will be hosting the G20 from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from the Rann of Kutch to Kohima. So what I'm saying is we will be covering the entire country in this G20. Every state and union territory, every citizen of India should really be a stakeholder. And I'm so glad that because of the strong academic base that is here, a strong base in research, innovation, enterprise, Pune is a city that has many G20 meetings. And I think most prominent of this is the G20 Education Ministers meeting, which will take place here in June. And I have no doubt that that symbiosis with its investment in knowledge-based education, in ensuring, and yesterday we also found that many of the themes that we are discussing in the G20, the sectoral areas, are really areas that you're already working on, you're already studying, and so there is a synergy here. And we will really look forward to a much closer cooperation between symbiosis. Because when I talk about making sure that every citizen is a part of that connect, we're also doing it through a Jan Bhagidari mode, which means that we are working through the G20 University Connect, we're working through schools, we're working through festivals across the country, and even unique areas like marathons, quiz competitions, any way possible to spread the message of the G20 and India's G20 presidency and priorities down to the grassroots levels. Model G20 replaces Model UN. So this is also another interesting phenomenon. I want to take this opportunity to thank Professor Majumdar for announcing the 20 G20 related scholarships. I think this is a tremendous gesture, not only for students, but also scholars from the G20 countries. And I think this is great. And when you talk about inclusivity, the Prime Minister said that we want to see an ambitious, inclusive, result-oriented, decisive presidency. The word inclusive is important. Under India's G20 presidency, there will be the largest representation of African countries ever. We have 6 African countries that will participate under our G20 presidency. And I think it is high time that we gave far more representation to Africa than we have done. As you know, as part of our foreign policy outreach, for the first time, every African country has been visited by at least a minister from India's union government. Every African country has an Indian embassy, and I think this is a part of our, desire to ensure that our friends in the global south, our friends in the developing world, and especially our friends in Africa, are our priority, and I think that is very, very critical. So let me end by thanking once again, the university for inviting me. Thank the students for being patient and listening to me. And certainly, we do hope that you will, as we progress in our presidency, take an interest and also contribute in whichever way possible, whether it's through Think 20, it's through Urban 20, it's through Youth 20. There are many avenues, and education, of course, is an area that you could contribute through, and we look forward to your being an essential stakeholder in the G20 process. Thank you, Namaskar, and Jai Hind.
Sir, it is beautiful how you linked the Bhagavad Gita and taught all of us its essence and how it is important to us. It is indeed crucial to enjoy the journey and work with commitment and not for the sake of the fruit. Thank you for tracing India's importance across the globe as the fastest growing economy, whether it is respect to the COVID-19 virus or apart from it, and touching upon the topic of Jan Bhagyadari Connect. All of us are proud that helping each other across all spheres in the globe is ingrained in our culture and our philosophies. I now call upon Dr. Ishita Ghosh from Symbiosis School of Economics to facilitate the question and answer round with Shri Harshvardhan Shringla.
Thank you so much for this very, very insightful and introduce yourself quickly, mention your institution, name institution, ask your question. Let's not have a background and a backdrop to your context to your question because we have lots of questions to take care of. The first person I would like to call upon is Vaibhav Puranik from SSI. Are you around? Please ask your question.
So, myself, Vaibhav Puranik from Symbiosis Statistical Institute. My question is, as per you, what are the tangible goals which can be achieved by the G20 countries in the next 5 years, and what contribution will be India will be having in those goals?
The next question is from Ronak Pahuja. Yeah, he's there.
Sir, myself, Ronak Pahuja from Symbiosis Statistical Institute. My question is, does India is planning to expand UPI in G20 countries, and is India planning to expand UPI on a global level? Thank you, sir.
So that it would become an alternative to SWIFT. That is what you have asked. Yes. The next person I would like to call upon is Arpan from SSE. Are you there?
Yes, stand up,
Arpan. Respected dignitaries, I am Arpan and I am from Symbiosis School of Economics. And my question is, can India use diplomacy towards creating strategic partnerships in Africa? And if yes, what's the progress on it? Thank you.
Shrikar Srivastav. Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Shrikar Srivatsadagam from Symbiosis School of Economics. My question is related to the field of international relations. How do we make economics and international relations a cult field, just like how we have medical and engineering in India? And how much roadmap do you see in this vision? Thank you.
I would like to add the student from Afghanistan. He would like to ask a question. Rehman Rehmani from Afghanistan.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. Happy to be here. Sir, actually, about G20, we have been there and we have been connected through Symbiosis to G20 since the initial days of the G20 presidency been taken by India. We have heard a lot about it, and we have now all information about G20, what it is all about. Only three things, there will be just three parts of my questions. I have a question which has the logistic, waste management and security. three parts I would of the G20 throughout the years, and especially the main event which is going to happen, despite of the challenges, the security challenges and threats we are having all around the world. And the other part is that sir, you have talked about the opportunities and strengths that India is having overcoming the challenges. But I would like to ask that, can you discuss the logistical challenges that they are involved in organizing the events of this scale, of this massive scale, and how India is planning to overcome it? And the other part to it is that how will India ensure that environmental impacts of the event is minimized, particularly in the term of waste and energy usage, which is, I think here I have the brochure, which is written there on the major priorities too, that the stronger climate actions. So under that, I would like to ask about the waste management throughout the events. Thank you.
Okay. Another international student, Lucy from UK, would like to ask a question. And the final question will come from one of our faculty members, Anish Tode. He would like to ask his question after Lucy.
So, hello, sir. I'm Lucy, senior batch at Symbiosis School of International Studies. In your remarks, you mentioned globally it's a very difficult situation at the moment. And in the context of sanctions on Russia and ongoing trends of de-dollarization, I was wondering what you perceived as potential opportunities for India and motivations behind particular tricky foreign policy choices. Thank you.
Wait for that for the next round. So would you like to?
Hello? Yeah.
So thank you. I think they were all very, very interesting questions, and really, I think made me also think very carefully about many of the issues that you have all applied your minds to. Now, let me start with the question by Vaibhav on, what are we looking at, as part of the G20, not now, but over the next 5 years, and that's a fair question. I think one aspect that we have to note in the G20's, let's say, presidency, and the G20 is an organization that is very strongly guided by the presidency. Unlike many other organizations, the G20, whoever holds the G20 presidency has a secretariat, takes all the organizational decisions, as well as sets the agenda. And so, although the decisions of the G20 are by consensus, the agenda and the narrative is set by the presidency. And uniquely, you've got 4 developing countries that are either held or are holding the presidency in the 4 years that we've seen. So Indonesia has just handed over the presidency to us, and we will hand over the presidency to Brazil. Brazil will hand over the presidency to South Africa. So really, we have the IPSA countries having the presidency one after the other. So I would say there would be a strong development agenda in the G20, and many of the areas in which there has been emphasis by Indonesia, by ourselves, will be carried forward both by Brazil and South Africa. In many, there is a perception that the G20 is largely G7 driven, and that's because the presidencies in the G20 have largely been with the G7 countries, and Japan has been president, Germany has been president, but now, coincidentally, it's 4 developing countries, one after the other. And I think the agenda would have a strong development-oriented prioritization. And I think that other members of the G20 will be also happy to go with it, because that is the need of the hour. So whether there are issues that relate to climate financing, for example, or the issues that relate to waste to wealth, circular economy, concepts that relate to ensuring that the issue of debt, indebtedness of countries, the issue of providing a greater mandate to the multilateral financial institutions, these are all developing country agenda issues, strengthening the WTO, and those I think will see greater traction in the next few years to come. And I'll also, in the subsequent questions, try and in answering the subsequent questions, try and explain some of this. Now, Ronak, I think, had a question on the UPI and how do we plan to take it globally. And that's a very, very good question because, the Prime Minister at the Indonesian summit, the G20's summit in Bali, Indonesia, said that 40% of all digital transactions across the world are UPI transactions. In other words, the UPI alone accounts for 40% of total digital transactions in the world. So we are by far world leaders in the use of digital transaction. We are world leaders in fintech. We are world leaders in financial inclusion, and that I think is a good story. The Prime Minister also pointed out, he said that there are 4 billion people in the world who don't have identity cards. There are 2 billion people who don't have access to bank accounts. They're unbankable. Now, if we use our Jam Trinity, and if you look at our financial inclusion systems, and many of you are familiar with it, but very, very basically, what we have done is that by ensuring that every person in our country has access to a bank account, what we call banking the unbankable, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, by ensuring that every person in our country has an identity card to the Aadhaar scheme, and by ensuring that internet connectivity is the cheapest in the world, we have really ensured that people in our country can go for mass digitization, and that the benefits that the government provides to the weakest sections of our population go directly into the bank accounts of people. So as you know, during the COVID crisis, the government supported 800 million of our citizens because it was a difficult time. The government transferred $37 billion of equivalent Indian rupees digitally to the accounts of different beneficiaries. Happily, a majority of the beneficiaries were women. 57% of those who received money directly into their accounts under this scheme were women. 67% of rural women were those who received amounts directly into their accounts from the government. So financial inclusion is a way of empowering not just the citizens of our country, but the most weakest sections of our community. And certainly it has empowered women in many ways because the money goes directly into their account. It cannot be taken from them. They are controlling the money that's available with them. So I think financial inclusion has done wonders for our country. And we, in our presidency, have a strong interest in taking that experience and that expertise to the rest of the world. And we are offering the G20 the possibility of working with us in providing those, what is called digital public infrastructure, as open source systems to countries across the world that will empower its citizens, that will ensure governments that are able to fulfill their national priorities. And I think that is something that we are working on. And I'm happy to say that we've made some progress in the first round of talks that we've had under that. And in the G20, there is a working group which is called Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion. And that global partnership, as part of the G20, works with the Global South, with the developing countries. So just recently, I was in Hyderabad, where 40 countries of the Global South came forward and were actually given a module on our experiences with financial inclusion. And we worked closely with the UN's, it's called, Without Cash scheme. In other words, this is an organization that promotes cashless transactions. And I think we are working closely with them to achieve these ends. So this is a very important objective of ours, and how can we use our experiences in digital transformations and get the rest of the world to benefit from that is something that we have high on our agenda in the G20. Now, Arpan, I think, had a question about diplomatic strategies. How can we diplomatically strategize to take our, let's say, outreach to Africa? What can we do in Africa? And I think that's a valid question. We were discussing that yesterday also. Africa really is a continent with tremendous potential. Its potential is still to be tapped, whereas the rest of the world, I think, has, in most parts of the world have reached a certain level, are plateauing. Whereas Africa, I think the potential is enormous, and I think there is huge scope for us, for the G20 to work in Africa. India as a country is already, as I mentioned, that we have taken steps to vastly increase our outreach in Africa. through our lines of credit, through concessional loans, and also through the iTech program and various programs that enable us. It is not just in terms of projects, and not just in terms of financial assistance, but also in terms of sharing know-how, knowledge, and experience. And the e-Arogya Setu, the e-Vidya Bharati program, and I'm happy to say that Symbiosis International University has also been involved with your own e-education programs directly into Africa. And that's what we want to promote. I mean, we are saying, share our know-how so that you can have that know-how. Share our best practices and our expertise so that you can have it. And so it is not just in Africa, but in different parts of the world, in the global south, that we are working through our iTech program, through our different programs in order to reach out. And again, when we talk about iTech, when we talk about the ICCR scholarship, I'm very happy to say that when we look at institutes of repute and institutes of quality, I think the Symbiosis University is high on our list of students who get these prestigious scholarships and want to study in India. I think many of you are from those who have got these scholarships and are here in Symbiosis University, and we are happy to facilitate that. So Africa is an important area of our engagement. You know that we have the India-Africa Forum Summit, which is supposed to meet annually. Because of COVID, we've not been able to meet. But the last India-Africa Forum Summit in India was attended by heads of state and government from most of the African countries, and is an important forum for us to engage Africa at its leadership level. So I think that will continue, and we will take it forward even more as we go along. Shrikar, I think, spoke about how we can link economics and international relations, and I think that's again a very valid point. I do know that at one time, the Prime Minister himself said that we must focus more in our international relations, in our external engagement, on the economic aspects of this. And he had come up with the concept of the 3 T's, which is focus on trade, technology, and tourism. And that, I think, was internalized in our diplomatic outreach, because we did tell all our embassies that whatever you do, this is going to be a focus area, the 3 T's. You may be a cultural officer, you may be an officer who's dealing with say, education, for example, but you must yourself focus on one of these areas so that we can look at your contribution in that area, and that whatever you do, you will be evaluated on how you've contributed into the 3 T's. So the economic aspects in our engagement is critical, and I think we do not overlook that. Development is a part of that. I remember that one of our first heads of missions conferences when Prime Minister Modi and the government had come into office was called Diplomacy for Development. How can you contribute through your diplomatic outreach to our developmental priorities? Whether it's Make in India, whether it's smart cities, whether it is even Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, whatever the different schemes that were there, how can you contribute, and what do you bring to the table from your country, which you're posted in? So this is an area of interest. I think Rahman had some very good questions which we are dealing with even now in terms of organization, in terms of logistics, in terms of security. I think we give the highest importance to security, because we are aware that previous G20 meetings have attracted anti-social elements, anarchists. The event in Hamburg, for example, had to be shut down because many of these elements took over the streets. But we are aware that there could be many security pitfalls, and as we conduct meetings in different parts of the country, that is an important priority. And as we come closer to the summit, I think that will become an even greater priority. And you can be sure that the security interests of our guests during G20 would be paramount. Logistical challenges in hosting meetings, 200 odd meetings in different parts in 56 different cities of our country are very important. And are quite daunting, to be honest. We have taken the G20 to cities that have had, in many senses, limited capacity, hardly any international exposure, and I think that has been a challenge. What we have worked on is, with all of these cities and all of these states that are involved, is how can we really build capacities. Many places have built convention centers. I think almost all states have developed roads,